Callie has a really interesting study, and I have the honor and pleasure of advising her. Thank you. So as Dr. Dunn said, my name is Callie Keese, and I understand that many of you, this word parasocial might be completely new. That is totally fine. It's a really big buzzword at the moment online, and the definition is a parasocial relationship, also known as PSR, is a relationship that a person imagines having with another person whom they don't actually know. To be completely 100% transparent, I'm guilty of having a parasocial relationship in the past, especially as a teenager. Despite growing up in the age of social media, I never really had any sort of social media accounts until one fateful day in May of 2009, when I somehow discovered the Jonas Brothers were having a live chat on Facebook. Obviously, I had to watch this, so I made an account and just dove in. I was so excited. I was just standing in my kitchen watching them, and it was almost like if I closed my eyes, I could imagine I was in the same room as they were, but I wasn't. I was in my kitchen in a small town on the Texas-Oklahoma border, watching on my laptop along with thousands of others. Meanwhile, they were somewhere else in the world, with a Disney-approved smile on their faces, sitting in front of a computer because they had to. Looking back on that, I just really want to cringe because it's just horrific thinking that I was so obsessed with that one moment in time. As I've gotten older, however, I've really begun to look back on that time with fresh eyes when it came time for me to start thinking about my thesis. I just kept going back to that one moment in my kitchen, and I couldn't understand why. And I just started throwing around ideas in my head, but nothing really felt right about how to connect the two, until ultimately I realized the core of all of my ideas came from wondering if social media makes it easier to form a parasocial relationship, and if so, how does having the PSR affect someone? So parasocial relationships were first studied by Drs. Donald Horton and Richard Wall in 1956. These are the two that came up with the idea that mass media allows spectators, fans, viewers, performers, the everyday person like you and me, to imagine they have a close relationship with the performer. Obviously, in 1956, mass media looked a lot different than it does today. They really had no way to look in the future and see that 70 years on down the road, society could access anyone that's ever been in the public eye in the snap of a finger with a few swipes. Fortunately for us, we now have researchers who are beginning to look at that connection. We have two, Drs. Hoffer and Bond, that are beginning to study that, and they have determined that, or hypothesized that social media allows fans to get a glimpse as to what their favorite public performers do during their private lives, and it makes it easier to imagine these interactions with them. So I knew I couldn't just straight out ask, do you believe you have a parasocial relationship with someone in the public eye? I had to go about this in a very strategic manner. So first, I really wanted to gather why people follow the people that they do, how they feel about the relationship between themselves and the figures, and to get a better look at the interactions that they may have. I also wanted to look at other aspects to see if I could see a connection between important demographics, like ages, gender, how many social media accounts they have, how many people do you follow. I figured out the best way to do this was to use an anonymous survey, and I sent that out over social media and kept the survey going for just about 2 weeks. And throughout discussing this topic with Dr. Dunn, and as I've already mentioned in the presentation, we both said a few times that it potentially could be a touchy subject. I held out hope and crossed my fingers and just really put out in the world that I would get a ton of people. Unfortunately, our original idea that it was a touchy subject probably turned out to be true. As I was only able to gather about 10 responses, but 10's better than 0, so on my wins. Out of the 10 that took the survey, 9 of those individuals identified themselves as female, whereas 1 identified themselves as non-binary. I also had the majority of respondents fall between the ages of 25 and 34. One person said they were between 18 and 24, and the final person said they were between 35 and 44. When it came to the interactions that people reported, the majority of people said that on their favorite account, they interact with public figures mainly on Instagram. Twitter/X, whatever you want to call that platform, came second, YouTube came third. Unsurprisingly, the least favorite platform was Patreon, for those of you that don't know. Patreon is a monetization platform that allows content creators to run a subscription service so that they can fund their content. Essentially, to interact with any creator on Patreon, you have to pay a monthly fee. Funnily enough, I originally had my notes to mention how personally I would never do that. I prefer to interact with whoever on quote-unquote free social media platforms. That wasn't until this morning when I had YouTube on in the background as I was finishing this up, and I noticed that a channel I follow on YouTube announced they were moving to their own paid streaming platform, and well, now I'm paying $60 to access their content. So next, I looked at what makes someone follow a media figure. Every reason essentially boiled down to similar interests. I got a lot of responses about how the figure has a similar sense of humor. They share the same hobbies. I also got responses about how they just like what the figure puts out and they want to keep up with the figure and what projects are coming up and when. So by this point, I figured I could finally get into the meat of my question. I asked if the respondents have ever felt an emotional connection to a public figure they follow. Overwhelmingly, the response was yes, and only 3 people saying they maybe had one, they just couldn't really pinpoint it. I also allowed participants to tell me a little bit about their parasocial relationship, and I have 2 really interesting responses that I would love to share with y'all today. One said that while they might feel inspired by that figure they're interacting with, they keep in mind that they don't actually know that person. So they're very adamant on, okay, let's separate me from them. The second response I actually really enjoyed was from a person who became a mod or a moderator on the live streaming platform Twitch, and through that position, eventually became friends with that public figure. Finally, I asked participants if they view their parasocial relationship, either in the past or ongoing, through a positive or negative light. This is when I got the most surprising result of all. Only 1 person said they viewed their parasocial relationship as negative. 3 reported a neutral view, and the rest reported a somewhat positive or extremely positive view. The negative response mentioned how they feel looking back on it, they spent too much time obsessing over that one individual, and how even a decade later, their friends, albeit lovingly, still give them grief for it today. The positive views, on the other hand, range from they were able to meet friends, they had positive impacts on that person's mental health. One person even said, oh, through this parasocial relationship, it eventually led me to understand what I wanted to do as a career. So overall, the vast majority of respondents said they believe they have had a parasocial relationship. And the simple majority said that their parasocial relationship was more positive than it was negative. So that leads us to what do we do now? What does this tell me? Well, number 1, social media does make it easier to form connections with our favorite celebrities. Number 2, to me, shockingly enough, parasocial relationships can be positive as well as negative. However, there still needs to be more research done as to how and why parasocial relationships form, how they develop, how they end, and how the effects that parasocial relationships in general have on society as a whole. Thank you.
First off, I want to say, congratulations. I think that was very brave and courageous and very informative. Curious as to know what kind of cognitive implications, just on the broad level, would you say that you kind of, felt like you learned from this? Thank you.
I really don't know, just because it was when I say I blasted on social media, I did. And I kept it very, very, very anonymous. So I really have no idea. I would love to study that in the future, though. It'd be really interesting to see if there is a correlation and connection. Dr. Dunn and I were, as this was closing, we were talking about, I wonder if there's something between what people do. Like I know the person who mentioned, through my parasocial relationship made me realize what they want to do as what I want to do as a career. Well, they followed a band when they were a teenager, became a really big fan of that band, which led them to going into PR. Makes sense. So it really is just clearly very interesting.
Great, thank you.
One of the things that, first of all, congrats, you've done amazing work, and you have followed your passion throughout, which I think is terrific. But one of the overwhelming findings is that parasocial relationships can be positive.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit more. Were you expecting?
I was expecting it to
negative?
be negative. Like I said, it is a touchy subject. I feel like a lot of people see it in a negative light because you come across as obsessive or delusional. So to me, that's kind of the mind frame I went into, is that people will be like, oh, no, I don't even want to talk about this ever.
So with that, and given this finding, and again, it's with 10 people, so, but that's all right. Are there possible ways that we could add value, make contributions to society by having parasocial relationships that are aiming to spread joy, spread kindness? Or could leaders within their organizations?
There's, I didn't include this statistic, but I actually asked the types of public figures people follow. And unfortunately, we're a very materialistic society, so the majority of people follow actors, musicians, authors, and all that. They don't put work into society. But the least followed, I guess, population would have been politicians. And so I feel like maybe if we put a little more care into politicians, that could lead us in a better direction into society as a whole. Just my idea. Thank you.
So I guess I say a few words first. So it was my absolute pleasure to work with Callie this semester. I did not have the joy of having Callie in class. I wish that I did. I know she is a terrific student, and she is incredibly driven by her interests and her passion, and that was very inspiring and exciting for me. Callie first came to me in the fall semester, where she was trying to understand what her topic was going to be, and she visited with a lot of faculty members, and I said, I've never heard the term parasocial relationship. I do study social networks, and I do study relationships, but you're really intriguing me and interesting me, and I should say she did not pick an easy topic at all, and was undeterred. She went through IRB and had some pushback about this could potentially be a touchy subject, and how are you protecting your respondents, and she rose to every challenge. So I wouldn't be surprised if she keeps that survey open, that she has a lot more respondents now. But yes, it will be very interesting.
I did have a question on that. I was going to ask if you had to go to IRB.
Yes, I did.
I used research in social media. I had a similar experience where we tried to run things on social media with very poor results. Had better results with asking professors to give extra credit in their class. So you might want to consider that if people need extra credit at the end of the semester.
And I was getting really, I will say, it was very touch and go for a moment. It came down to last week. I was like, okay, I'm about to ask Dr. Dunn to offer extra credit if she's willing, but
I'm still willing. I'm still willing.